welcome again to another installment of the Ozarks Voices Oral History Project of the Missouri State University Libraries. My name is Tom Peters. I'm the Dean of Library Services. Today's date is Thursday, July 7th, 2016, and we are in Nixa, Missouri this morning, and our interviewee today is Keith Keltner. Keith, welcome.
Thank you.
We're in Keith's home, and Keith, you know, you've had an amazing life. Let's begin with the beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born in Nixa, Missouri, right in the home that I lived in. And I understand that I interrupted Thanksgiving Day and Thanksgiving lunch, and Dr. Wasson, who was our next door neighbor, come from his Thanksgiving luncheon and came over and helped me get delivered to this world.
So you had interrupted two Thanksgiving celebrations.
That's right. And you know, as fate would have it, just recently I was on a radio show with Larry Friend and Jimmy Dorn. Jimmy Dorn's granddad was Dr. Wasson, of all things, and Jimmy D's father grew up in Nixa, and his dad had the drugstore here in Nixa.
Okay.
So it's a small world after all.
Yeah. What year was that you were born?
1935.
1935.
Right.
And so when was Thanksgiving that year? What date was it?
It was on November the 28th.
28th.
And I got to tell you a funny story about that. When I registered for my Social Security, which has been 15 or 20 years ago, evidently in them researching that, they discovered that I was born on November the 29th according to the birth certificate. So I went back and pulled that, but the lady that ran the post office then, I'm sure it was closed on November the 28th, Thanksgiving, so they went the next day to get my birth certificate, and she dated it the 29th. I'd always celebrated it on the 28th, but now I celebrate it on the 29th.
So you interrupted two Thanksgiving dinners when you were born, and now you have two birthdays.
I have two birthdays.
Every year. So you grew up in Nixa. Nixa back then was 200 people?
A wide spot in the road.
Yeah.
A couple hundred people.
Yeah.
My granddad, Keltner, was the first mayor of Nixa in 1900. And my grandmother was the daughter of the man who run the mill at Riverdale, which is just south of Nixa here on the Findlay River. Her name was Bessie Gilmore. And all of my ancestors came over to this part of Missouri in the 1840s.
Oh, okay.
And there were 5 Keltner brothers, and one of those brothers settled here in Nixa, and the others, one in a town called Keltner, Missouri, which is east of Sparta, and Chestnut Ridge, which is south close to Spokane, one at close to Springfield. So they all scattered everywhere. So I'm from the Nixa tribe of Keltners.
Okay. What was it like growing up in Nixa in really the 40s? If you were born in 35, it was about 40 when you started to become aware of life and yourself.
And that was the era of World War II.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I guess when I was 6 years old, we had gone to a matinee at the Fox Theater on the square in Springfield, and when we came out, to show you what an impression the war made on me, there were 2 or 3 boys hawking special editions of the Springfield Leader and Press newspaper announcing that Pearl Harbor had been bombed by the Japanese.
Oh, really?
And there was quite a commotion. All of us coming out of the theater, and everybody wondered what was going to happen, so that was quite unusual.
Now, wasn't that a Sunday in history?
It was a Sunday, yeah.
So
We'd gone to a Sunday matinee.
Gone to a Sunday matinee.
Yeah.
And by the time you came out,
The news had already made it to the street.
Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
So then you went to Nixa High?
Went to Nixa High.
Yeah.
All 12 years.
Yeah.
Graduated from there.
Was it one school?
It was all one school. I don't know whether you're familiar with Nixa, but when you go down Main Street, the old school is there, and that's now the Thought Administration Building, and that's where the offices for the Nixa school system is.
Uh-huh. But that was, did they have kindergarten back then, or was it first grade?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's first grade through 12.
Yeah, so you went all 12 grades.
All
How big was your graduating class?
There was a whole sum of 12 in the graduating class. I think there was like 100 or 110 totally in the whole school, all 12 grades.
All right. So, and then, so at some point, when did you become interested in singing? When did you realize?
That's while I was in school. I was in different singing events, but we had a music teacher, Miss Irina Amy, that discovered that 4 of us had very similar voices. Myself, Keith Young, and a boy by the name of Johnny Merritt, and Larry Hedgepeth. So she whipped us all together to start singing as a quartet. Well, lo and behold, we were pretty good. And
you all in the same grade?
We was all in the same grade.
So 4 out of 12 were good singers. At least 4.
That's right.
How many boys were there in the whole of your own class?
Well,
6?
I think there were 6 or 8.
Yeah.
So that was more than half of the boys in the class. Now I take that back. Keith Young was in the grade ahead. He was 1 grade ahead of us.
Okay.
So 3 of us was in the same class.
All right.
So she got to working with us, and when we were freshmen in high school, we were good enough that we had won the first rating at the state event in Columbia, Missouri, which was unbelievably unusual because if you would win that, you'd naturally be a senior in high school, you know. So we went to the state events for the next 3 or 4 years, and we got so that we could sing so well that we'd entertain the rest of the kids from other cities there out in the hallway. We'd sing songs for a lot of them barbershop songs and what have you. So yeah, we started together at an early age.
Early age. And you called yourself the Teen Tuners?
Called ourselves the Teen Tuners. Yeah.
Okay. Did you? I mean, you know, I don't sing. Did you like singing? Was it joyful to sing?
Oh yeah, sure it was.
Yeah.
You know, someone told me sometime that when you're singing, you can't be anything but happy. And I thought about that a long time, and I've thought about that hundreds of times while I'm singing. And he was right. It's always true. If you are singing, you are happy.
You have to.
So singing is a happy way to live your life.
Good. So after high school, then you went to Drury?
I went to Drury.
Yeah. And 3 of you, the notes I have is that you, the other Keith, and Larry all went to Drury.
We did.
And Johnny
Merritt.
Yeah.
Johnny Merritt.
Did he? Where did he go?
He had left Nixa in the meantime, and he didn't go to college. He moved away. I've forgotten where, but somewhere in Kansas he moved to. So we were without a base.
Yeah.
And we joined the Barbershop Society in Springfield right out of high school. And that's where we met a lot of barbershoppers and other people. And S.K. Grundy, who was a musician with Lawrence Welk. He grew up in South Dakota where Lawrence Welk started his band. And he was in Springfield. He'd married a Springfield girl. And he was interested in music and barbershop. He worked for the Hoover Music Company then. And he heard us, and he recognized immediately that the 3 of us had voices that were almost compatible. Although there's 4 parts in barbershop singing, the 3 of us were really all tenors, believe that or not. And the one that ended up being tenor, Larry Hedgepeth, was an exceptionally high voice tenor. He didn't he didn't sing in his falsetto. All of his high notes were all in his regular voice, believe it or not.
So how did you meet SK? And was his first name Shirley?
It was, and his middle name was Keith. Shirley Keith Grundy.
All right. I don't think I've ever heard of a man named Shirley. I know of a boy named Sue.
Yeah. I'm sure that's why he went by the name of SK. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a story there, but
most everybody just called him Grundy, though.
Yeah. How'd you meet?
Well, met him at one of the barbershop meetings, and he took a liking to the three of us, and he knew this Joe Dalzell then, and he sung in a different quartet, but he was really hung up on Joe's bass voice. He thought his voice would fit perfectly with ours. So he got us all together one time to sing with Joe, and it was an immediate lock. It was a great sound.
Yeah.
So that's how it all got started.
So Joe was older then.
Joe was twice as we were all 20 and Joe was 40.
Yeah. But it and pretty much you stuck together as that quartet for
we
years.
did for 10 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what was that like as you traveled around? It was like three young men and a middle-aged man.
Well, Joe may have been 40 years old, but he had a like mindset, I guess, that the three of us did. He fit in perfectly. His hair was starting to turn gray, so he dyed his hair black and styled it in a crew cut. And he of course, looked like he was a little older than us, but not 20 years older than us. He fit in pretty good. Okay.
So, like you say, it was just a lock. It was a perfect match.
The only thing that wasn't a lock was the two Keiths, me and Keith Young. At that time, I was singing baritone, and Keith Young sung the lead part. And Grundy decided that we ought to switch that because he thought I had a stronger voice than Young, and Young, the baritone voice needs to blend in. It does. You don't want to hear it. All you want to hear is the sound in there, but you don't want to pick out that voice. And the lead voice, of course, sings the melody, so it needs to stand out and be heard, so that whatever song you're singing, you can detect the melody in the song.
Yeah.
So he switched us, and that was a perfect fit. It was what we should have done long before, but that changed the whole complexion of the quartet.
Mm-hmm.
And
so S.K. Grundy was your coach?
He was our coach.
Your mentor?
And he arranged the
your
music.
Manager? Was he kind of your manager?
Well, he really wasn't. That's somewhat, but really we managed ourselves. Joe Dalzell, since he was older, he was the guy that took care of all of our bookings and handled what little dab of money we had and etc. But SK was basically our coach, and he arranged the music for us so that it could be sung in barbershop fashion or whatever he wanted. We did a lot of things besides barbershop too, but he was a master musician. I was always amazed at him. He could sit down and write the 4-part harmony on a staff sheet and never touch the piano. He could hear it in his head how those chords were going to made up. In fact, I've seen him do a 20-piece orchestra rendition, do all the parts, the trombone, trumpets, drums, everything on a sheet of music. Never touch a piano. All was in his head.
Wow. So you never had any artistic differences with SK?
Yes, I'm sure we did. We didn't always agree. And some of the songs that he did for us, after we learned enough of the song to be able to transpose it in our minds, sometimes we'd refuse to sing those songs. They weren't a fit for us. And after a while, he realized that, and he knew everything he wrote for us that we wasn't going to sing every one of them. But the ones that we did keep turned out to be really popular in the world of barbershopping all across the United States and the rest of the world at that time. We were an extremely popular barbershop quartet.
Yeah, very successful.
For a long time before we ever won the championship.
Yeah, you were very successful.
We were very successful.
Yeah. So you started singing together in this configuration.
Yeah.
While you were at Drury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were Drury.
And so was it weekends or how, just
We
what was
had-
the life of a quartet?
We rehearsed 2 days a week,
Uh-huh.
sometimes 3, and then most of our engagements were over the weekend, either Friday night or Saturday or Sunday afternoon or a Saturday night performance.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we'd do 2 or 3 shows on a weekend, and we'd travel all different ways. If they were close enough, we'd go drive our own cars, but if there was a distance, we'd fly.
Really?
Sometimes we've gone by train.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever did go by bus, but
Yeah. How far would you travel? Over the years?
well, we've all the way to Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, a lot of places back east. Done several West Coast stints, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, sung in Mexico, Toronto, Canada. Done a lot of shows in Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, and Minnesota. If you think about those areas, so they were strong German, and Germans were great barbershop lovers. They loved harmony. They loved to sing. So a lot of the good barbershop chapters were in that area. So we did a lot of shows there, and we sung in South and New Orleans, in Miami. We traveled all over the country, Atlanta.
Yeah. And when you see a show, what does that mean?
Okay, most of the shows that we appeared on were barbershop parades, what they call barbershop shows. A local barbershop chapter, let's say in Chicago, would usually hold a parade once a year, and they would sell tickets to the show and hold it in their local theaters or in auditoriums or whatever they had available, and they'd highlight those shows with out-of-town guests like ourselves that were really well known in the barbershop circles, plus their own local quartets and their chorus, their barbershop chorus would perform on the show, and those were the shows that most of the shows that we did. So we were the star of most of the places that we were.
You were like the headliners.
Yeah, we were the headliners.
Yeah. So with these shows, would they be 3 hours long, 2 days long?
Oh no, they were 2 or 3 hours long. Yeah, you're right.
So it'd be like a Saturday night. You'd travel, and it'd be a series of quartets.
Right.
And typically you'd be the headline.
Right.
The big draw.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to need all the details, but you made enough money to make it worthwhile.
We did.
Yeah.
At the time, I never will forget when we finally become a medalist, which is 1956. We won 4th place in the international. We decided we could charge an outrageous fee then of $100 per man per show. So we got $400 plus first class air and accommodations, food and lodging.
Yeah, travel expenses.
The travel expenses. That's what we charged, and I'm pretty sure we charged that same rate the whole time, except the last 2 or 3 years. I think we finally raised the price to $150 a man or something like that.
Yeah.
But we were basically rich then. Now that was a lot of money in that day and age in the 50s, to make. Sometimes we'd have 2 or 3 shows on the weekend. If we'd make $200 or $300 a piece, my gosh, we was rolling in dough for a while. Of course, none of it lasted. We spent it all.
You were a young man.
Yeah, right.
So what was it like traveling? You traveled your cars, trains, planes. What was it like to travel as a group? Did you sort of all keep to yourselves, or were you very gregarious as a group?
Well, we were all friends with one another. There's no doubt about that. Being as close together as we were, we had difficult times, sure. Basically, we had pretty well paired off when we'd stay in a hotel or something. Always two to a room. So Joe and I was always partners. We'd stay in the same room, and Keith and Larry the other. I don't know why it turned out to be that way, but we paired off that way. But we never had any problems that I can recall now. I'm sure we did, but I've let those slip. I only remember the good times. I'm not a guy that dwells on the bad times.
Yeah. Well, I read, I don't know if you know this or not, but someone at Ohio State wrote a dissertation that included you.
No, I didn't know that.
And so I read that one time you were on a plane, and I don't know if you knew it or not, but then you were asked to deplane, and then this must have been a time when you actually got on the tarmac. You didn't, go the jetway. And then Miss America was on the plane, and then you serenaded Miss America as she deplaned.
I remember that. I do remember that, and I can't remember where, but yeah, that's right. We did.
So what did you sing? Here she comes, Miss America.
I don't remember. I'm sure it was not that one though. That's been a long time ago, and I've forgotten where this guy was in Ohio.
Yeah, I think it was at Ohio State. I'll get you the citation.
Okay, maybe I can recall what Miss America that was. Was it Miss America? You recall 59
I can't
or
remember
58?
what year it was. If he listed a year, but we probably could get it down to 2 or 3 maybe.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And then the other story I heard or read was one time Hubert H. Humphrey, when he was vice president, heard you or knew you were in the same hotel.
That was in Boston when we were singing there.
And he invited you up to his suite?
Right.
For a private performance?
We did.
Yeah.
And well, actually we did part of it out in the hallway. He had his people there with him, around him, that I'm sure they were, is it CIA?
Secret Service?
The Secret Service, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were Secret Service
Yeah.
that was guarding him, but he was trying to sing along with us.
Yeah.
He was really nervous. I remember this. Hubert was extremely nervous. I don't know whether he was ready to go on or if he'd come off and hadn't had a good reception or what.
Oh.
But we sung to him and he got all right after that. So evidently, Hubert loved quartet singing and close harmony, and he wanted to hear that.
Minnesotan, so he's a Minnesotan, so he must have enjoyed that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
Sure, he was probably had German descent, and he liked that.
Yeah. So he knew about you. He invited you up.
Right.
Yeah, good. Then one humorous story. When you won the championship, international championship in 1959, whenever you won an award or something, as the lead singer, would you normally be the one to accept the award and say a few words?
Not necessarily.
All right.
I just happened to be the spokesman for the group.
Okay.
I don't know whether I was self-appointed or the rest of the 3 guys appointed me or not, but whenever there was anything to say or introducing a song or acknowledging the audience or anything, I was always the guy that did that.
All right.
That was my job.
So you just won the international.
Yeah.
And you were asked to say a few words. And you'd just gotten married the weekend before.
Right.
And you announced to the crowd of 6,000 people that I've only been a wife for a week.
No, I'd only been a bride.
A bride?
Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't know that you
nothing would go through my mind then. It was completely blank. I never will forget that.
You don't remember
I kept thinking I was going to say bridesmaid, but I knew that wasn't right. So I said bride. I couldn't think of the word groom. That never occurred to me. And of course it broke up the audience. After I said it, there was a stunning silence, and then they all just went crazy, And for a few seconds, it didn't dawn on me what I'd said.
But you realized that.
Yeah, I realized then I'd made a drastic mistake.
You think one thing and say something else.
That's right.
So let's back up for a little bit. So you were doing a lot of performance at these, what were they called? Quartet?
jamborees or parades.
Parades, okay. Did you ever do any,
or just a barbershop show.
yeah. Did you ever do any live radio?
Oh yeah, we've done quite a lot of live radio.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I don't know what's to tell. We were on several radio shows, but we'd be invited to go to the studio, and of course there was no audience there. We'd sing a number or two, whatever the disc jockey or show host would want, and
Did you ever sing on KWTO?
I'm sure we have. I don't remember any specific incident, but yeah, KWTO and KTTS and KICK, and there were several radio stations in.
Would you get paid for those performances?
I doubt it. I imagine those were gratis.
Yeah, good exposure.
Good exposure. We did a lot of that too.
Yeah,
Freebies.
yeah, just to get your name and your voice out there.
Well, yeah, we didn't realize we had a product that had any value to it at the time.
Yeah.
But it was just oblivion. We, like 20 years old, we didn't have any sense, you know.
Right.
It was senseless.
But you're making pretty good money, and this was your day job, right?
That was our day job, yeah.
And it lasted for about 10 years, 11 years?
It did.
Yeah. So this was the time when television was coming on. And you got into television. Tell us about that. How did that all work out?
Well, actually, our coach Grundy, S.K. Grundy, when the Jubilee, not when it started, but in its mid-years, around 1956 or 57, they employed S.K. Grundy to be the band director and do some of their country music stars renditions and get them arranger and get them adapted for the TV show. He did a lot of that. So us being his fair-haired boys, he got us on the TV show.
So SK got you on the Jubilee.
He got us on there, and of course after we got started, we were in the group, so he didn't have to promote us anymore. We promoted ourselves there, but we got together a group that we called the Jumba Layers to do the background music for all the stars that came in to sing at the Jubilee show. Right. And any of the songs that SK would redo or arrange for the stars, then he'd always fit us in with the background music. So there were the four of us and three girls. There were 7 people that did the background music for the Jubilee, called the Jumba Layers.
Who were the 3 girls?
Young women. June Hamra, who is Sam Hamra's wife in Springfield. Sam's the guy that owns all the Wendy's and Panera Breads. He's been a great success. Sam was an attorney, still is an attorney.
Yeah. I've met him.
Yeah, have you met him? Well, you know Sam then.
So his wife June was one of the Jumba Layers.
She was one of the Jumba Layers. And then another gal named June Williams, who is still alive, and her husband run a chemical company in Springfield. And then Carol Henderson, who's now deceased, was one of the singers in that, and she was a singer from the Galena area.
Now, how did SK find those 3 young women?
Yeah, he knew these girls. I'm trying to remember how he knew them. One of the gals sang in a girls' barbershop quartet, what they call the Sweet Adelines.
Yeah.
And I think the other 2 sang in one of the choirs that he directed in Springfield then, one of the municipal choirs. I've forgotten what they were called. The symphony choir. And I think those 2 gals came from there. June Hamra was a high soprano, and the other 2 girls had lower voices, so he worked it all in, and we did background music just like the Anita Kurt singers did for the country shows in Nashville.
Yeah, Grand Ole Opry.
Grand Ole Opry and those
Yeah.
kind of shows.
Yeah. Why 7? Why not 8?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have I have the answer for most things, but I don't know the answer why 7.
Okay. So you performed on a lot of Jubilee.
Yeah, we did.
Programs. So tell us how a typical Jubilee week worked. Would you practice on Friday?
We did. We'd usually start on Wednesdays
Uh-huh.
and be there all day Wednesday, all day Thursday.
What happened on Wednesday? Were you just kind of laying out the show?
Laying out the show, getting everything lined out, how the scenes were going to work, and what songs went where. And
everybody had to be there for that.
Everybody had to be there for that. And of course, that was later it was at the Landers Theater. Originally, it was at the Jewel Theater.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are sat in the audience while they were working with whatever was on stage then.
Yeah.
But you had to be there all day, Wednesday and Thursday. And then Friday we put the show together in its final practice. And then did the same thing on Saturday, and the show came off on Saturday night. And it was live, so there wasn't any room for error. If you made a mistake, it was in the show. That's the way it came out. And I remember originally, of course, when they aired it nationally, they didn't have any national TV cameras in Springfield, so they brought their mobile unit down from St. Louis to air the show and put it on the airwaves.
Yeah. Who was kind of the producer director? Was it Brian Bisney?
Brian Bisney, yeah.
Yeah. So
Bisney.
he was the guy who was like on Friday when you were going through. He would say, "Oh, wait, let's think through, redo
Right.
this."
He was the guy that.
He was the director.
Right.
Yeah.
And Joe Slattery, who later became a very famous announcer out of the Chicago area, maybe he was even on radio or TV there then when you lived in Chicago. He was the master of ceremonies, so he was in on a lot of the decisions that were made about the show.
Yeah. All right. And so, what did it feel like? Do you remember the first time you were on national TV? And what did you think? A live national TV.
You'd think that where millions of people are watching you, that you'd lock up and you couldn't do anything. It didn't really bother me.
You might say bride when you meant groom.
Yeah. We knew what we were doing. We knew our songs forward and backwards, and there wasn't any reason for us to fear that we was going to make a mistake. If we did, we were really we sung together long enough. If one of us made a mistake, we could soothe it over and keep going, and really didn't slow us down. So no. It was just like singing in front of any audience. I don't remember it. You thought though that okay, now get your head in gear. You can't make a mistake here. So get thinking about what you're doing. Get your mind off of everything else. It was really thinking about what you were going to do.
Yeah. So roughly, how many shows did you on the Jubilee did you perform?
Oh boy, Well, there were several years there.
So it must have been over 100, well over 100.
Probably, yeah. I really don't know. I've never had it.
Any memorable nights when it was like things were really going well or not so well, or something funny happened?
One of the funniest things that I recall was when Gene Autry was the master of ceremonies for one of the Jubilee shows. I guess I can go ahead and say this, Gene's dead now. But he liked these drinks, and he liked to drink before he went on. But sometimes he
calmed his nerves.
He calmed his nerves, and sometimes I guess he drank too much. But he was introducing us, and he made the comment, and he said, "Now here are 4 fine ones. Here are the Pitchikers." And Joe Slattery come on right away and said, "Thank you, Gene. And here they are, folks, the Pitchhikers." He corrected it right away.
What'd you all think? Like, well, okay,
no, we didn't think it.
Just don't call us late for call us anything. Just
Yeah,
don't call us
right.
late for something.
Our mind was on singing the song, so it didn't really.
Did you ever? So the Jubilee had some nights. What I've read is sometimes some nights, especially during the summer months, you usually had a full house.
Yes.
Sometimes you do another show after you did the national telecast show.
Yes.
You'd do another show.
Yes.
You'd have an intermission or something. And would you do the same show?
We'd have a 15-minute intermission so they could empty out the theater and bring the crowd that was waiting outside to come in. Yeah, we did that on several occasions.
So did you do that? You know, you were part of some of those shows.
Yeah,
double shows.
most of those were done at the Jewel. The Jewel would only hold, I want to say 300.
Yeah. 300
people. So a lot of times it'd be more than that. Now when they moved to the Landers would hold 800 or 900 people, if I remember correctly. So I don't recall ever doing 2 shows at the Landers. But most of those always came at the Jewel Theater.
Yeah. Just one thing, Joe. Just live television was live television.
Yes, it was.
There was no 8-second delay like it is today. When you watch something today, you think you're watching live. There's a delay in there, so that if there's a wardrobe malfunction or a 4-letter word is uttered, someone in the booth can say, "Oh, go to black" or whatever.
Yeah, they bleep it.
Yeah. It was live.
Most of the shows, today are recorded, and they sanitize them then before they air them.
Right. But this was whatever happened. 9 million people saw.
That's right.
Did you ever get fan mail? Did the Pitchikers ever get fan mail?
Yes, we did. Joe received most of those because he was the guy that got all the mail and did the bookings and what have you.
He was like,
and after
manager.
Joe passed away, his son brought me all of the memorabilia that Joe had kept over the years. He had it down in his basement, and there were several boxes of this, and in that was tons of letters that he had saved. Joe was the type of guy who never throwed anything away. Whatever he got, it was in the box, you know. So there was hundreds of letters in there. I read most of them just to see what they had to say, but a lot of them were very interesting. People that had only seen us for the first time, that were impressed with what they saw on the show, you know, and just wanted to be heard.
So when you got married in '59, were you the last of the 4 to get married?
I was, yeah. Okay. I was.
So did the wives travel with you, or how did that work?
Not when we were going on these barbershop shows. Once in a while, if we had, well, let me back up. Excuse me. On a few occasions, we would rent a private plane here in Springfield to travel in, and one of the planes was a twin-engine Beechcraft, and it had 8 seats in it. And sometimes when we would rent that plane or lease it, we'd take the wives along on that particular show. Or if they couldn't all go, we'd fill the seats up with brothers or friends or something like that. Some of the family, you know, could go with us. Okay. And that plane was owned, the guy's name I've forgotten, but he owned Ozarks Wholesale Beverage. They were liquor distributors here in Springfield. And a lot of times they weren't using that plane. So, and I remember what we paid for it. It was $50 an hour flying time. So it would fly pretty fast. I think we could get to, let's say, Chicago in something like an hour and 15 minutes, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So it only cost us $50 or $75 to fly there.
Yeah,
and they only charged us for actual time in the air. So it was a nice way to go. It wasn't any more expensive, if as expensive as buying a first class airline ticket.
Right, yeah. So was it before or after you won the international that you were on the Perry Como show?
It was the same year we had won.
Do you remember? Was it before or after?
It was after we had won.
Your winning the international got the attention of their.
Well, I don't think we actually got their attention. they had contacted the International Office of Barbershopping to recommend a quartet for their particular show. Perry was a barber before he became a singer in his younger days, and they wanted to develop a show around him being a barber in his younger years. So they come up with the idea they wanted a barbershop quartet. Because I think I'm right about this, Perry actually sung a little while in a barbershop quartet when he was growing up. So they contacted the society, and we were the reigning international champions, so they asked us if we wanted to go. Well, sure, we wanted to go. And we stayed there all week rehearsing for that show, and that was quite an experience.
This was September of 1959.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what date the show was? Because I've seen the 23rd of September, and I've also seen the 30th of September.
I'm not sure what the date was. I'm really not. I'm sure it was a Saturday night show. Yeah. It was
New York City.
Yeah.
Bright lights, big city.
Yeah. And it was at the Music Hall, which is now where they produce most all of their live shows for NBC. Mm-hmm. Right across from the theater that the Rockettes perform at. Uh-huh. I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel, but it was a private hotel that we stayed at. Man, it was fancy. Yeah. And we each had a room. And
all expenses
paid. And I think I think they paid us a couple of $1,000 to be on the show, besides all expenses paid all week. Yeah. And Perry was really a nice guy. I remember our first rehearsal with him. He was in the barber chair. And we hit the first notes of whatever song it was we were singing. Perry jumped out of the chair and said, "Wow, where'd all those voices come from?" He said, "Let's start over again."
Kind of shocked him.
It shocked him. He really... And after that, though, he really got quite interested in the style and what we were doing, and I think he was highly impressed with what he was hearing. I think he didn't realize how sophisticated barbershop quartets, especially good ones, were, how well they could sing, and how it came out.
So you spent the whole week practicing and rehearsing.
Yeah.
And then it's Saturday night.
Yeah.
Do you remember that night at all?
I remember, of course, the spot with Perry that we sang with, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I don't know that much about the Perry Como show, but it was another variety show.
It was a variety show. It and the Ed Sullivan show was the two top shows of that year. Well, it stayed a top show. It was a Kraft Music Hall was the name of the Perry Como show, and Kraft products. And by the way, I think Kraft, of course, has the Springfield plant, and I think they were instrumental in getting us on that show too. Really? Okay. Because of the Springfield connection.
So again, that was the time in television where it was not uncommon to have one sponsor for an entire show.
No, it wasn't.
Whereas today, it's just a 30-second commercial.
Right.
They're just selling 30-second, 60-second spots.
Now, that was all Kraft. I don't remember, like Ed Sullivan, whether they had multiple spots or not. Yeah. And the Everly Brothers were on the show. Yeah. The Perry Como show. I'm trying to remember who else was on there. Well, the Everlys were just starting out. They were young guys then.
Yeah, that was like a big exposure for them too.
That was a big, gigantic exposure for them.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would you consider that the peak experience of the Four Pitchikers?
I don't think so. No, it was a great experience, but of course, winning the international in '59 in front of 6,000 dedicated fans.
Who really knew their quartets.
At the Opera House in downtown Chicago. And we were introduced by Ted Lewis then. Is everybody happy? Ted Lewis that had the cane. He was extremely popular then, a movie star. And he introduced us, and it was, now I'd say that was probably greatest experience that I had. I've had a lot of really good experiences, though. It's hard to classify them as good, better, and best. They were all good.
Tell us about how, unfortunately everything passes away, including the Four Pitchikers.
That's right.
How did it come to an end?
Actually, we had started to not have as many barbershop parades as we had. We were down to doing like a half a dozen shows a year, and of course we had to rehearse and stay in shape to be able to continue to do those kind of shows. So we were pretty burnt out at the time, and we all had young families, and I had a new baby. In fact, I just had my second child in '65 when we left, but the other guys had young children, and we all decided that let's just take a leave of absence for a while. And we did, and we just never did put it back together.
Yeah. But you stayed friends? You stayed in touch with
Oh,
them?
yeah. Still, we're friends all our life. In fact, Keith Young is the only one still alive. He still lives here in Nixa. I don't see him often, but yeah, we're still friends.
Okay. You recorded one album, correct?
Yes.
Let's Bust One.
Let's Bust One. Have you seen it?
Where did that phrase come from? Well, I know it's right behind you.
Yeah, right. Where did that phrase come from? Well, I don't know, but it was common terminology at the time we were singing that we really had a lot of volume when we wanted to put it out, but we could also have very soft tones too. But barbershoppers were notorious for like to sing tag endings that had high notes and a lot of volume coming out and what have you. And we were noted for those, doing those type of things. In fact, three of those song tags are still around in barbershop societies today and still very, very popular, and they sing them all the time. Yeah. 50 some odd years later, they're still singing them. So Let's Bust One came from that. Let's go bust one. Yeah,
that's really,
That's really hit one,
really
yeah. And I don't know who came up with that. I think the guy that ran Chord Record Company that made the record come up with that name.
Yeah, did it sell well?
It wasn't a barn burner. I think it sold. I think I remember it was like 2,500 copies or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. After the Four Pitchikers, most of your life occurred after that.
Right.
So what have you been doing lately?
Well, I'm retired now.
Yeah. What did you do between 65 and 2016?
Well, I was in business with a couple other brothers, and the business started out here in Nixa. In fact, while I was still singing in the Pitchikers, we had a couple of companies here in Nixa. One was Keltner Lumber Company, and the other was Keltner Oil Company. And while I was going to college, I worked at Keltner Oil Company, and my older brother managed both the oil company and Keltner Lumber Company. I had a cousin that owned Keltner Lumber, and he decided he wanted to sell it, and me and my brothers bought that. Right, and so I was in business there, and later in the 60s, we moved to Keltner Oil Company to Springfield, and we changed the name to Keltner Enterprises. We distributed motor oils and tires and batteries and automotive products, and we sold the Keltner Oil Company to a fellow that eventually tore it down and done away with it. And Keltner Lumber Company, when we moved, before we moved, we built a new Keltner Lumber Company. We called it Keltner Home Center out on the new Highway 60. Not 60. What is the highway that goes through Nixa right now. Camel Street. I always call it Camel Street, but it's
13.
no, it's not Highway 13. 160.
We know what road.
Yeah,
we
yeah, we know. It's
what road
Camel
we're
Street.
driving on.
Anyhow, we built it on Camel Street. It was Keltner Home Center. And we later sold that to the Meeks, and the Meeks store here in Nixa now was the old Keltner Home Center.
Oh, okay.
And Keltner Enterprises was located on Scenic in Springfield, across from Horton Smith Golf Course, and it was there for a very long time. And I left that business. I sold out to my brothers, I think in like 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to retire, and I did for a few weeks till my wife had me washing windows and fixing the roof. And I thought then, I better get another job or I'm going to get in trouble here. So when I retired from the company, one of the payoffs to me, we owned 100 acres of property in northwest Springfield, and I took that in as part of the trade-off. So I decided I'd develop that, and I did, and we developed that area, and it was called K Point, and we built about 275 homes there.
Hmm.
And during the process of building K Point, I decided I wanted to stay in the development business, so I got it in my head that I wanted to do a golf course community, because the lots I was selling at K Point were the low end of the spectrum. They were at that time $5,000 and $10,000 lots.
Yeah.
So I wanted to sell lots at a higher dollar value. So I thought the golf course would give it enough oomph that I could do that. So I found a piece of property in South Springfield that I bought from an old gentleman that had inherited it. And I developed the Millwood Golf and Racquet Club community, built the golf course and developed the lots and sold the lots. And then I sold it all that was 1990 or about 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And I sold it all in 2012, and since that time I haven't done anything except
Not even washing your windows?
other than I'm back to washing windows now and repairing the roof.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you've had an amazing life. Born and raised in Nixa. Became well known as the lead singer of the Pitchikers, and then went on to business success.
Of course, like you were talking about, I was in business a lot longer than I was singing. I forgot to tell you too, while I was at Keltner Oil Company, I had gone to a national convention on automotive parts because we were in that business, and I met a fella that was at the time making chrome wheels. His name was Ernie Chavez. He was from Los Angeles, and Ernie had a line of wheels called Astro, and he was having a lot of financial problems I got to know him pretty well, putting this deal together, but chrome wheels had just come out. And the kids were nuts about them then. They were very, very popular, and nobody was making them. So I got the bright idea, maybe Keltner Oil Company ought to get in the chrome wheel business, and we did. And we ended up owning the Astro plant in Los Angeles. It was in the Watts area, which was a very rough area at the time.
Yeah.
And
So when would this have been that you owned the Astro?
it was
Chrome
in the mid '60s to about 1975, for about a 10-year period in there.
So this is during I forget the year of the Watts riots, but it was what? 69?
This was right after the Watts was in the early '60s. The rise
63
there.
maybe.
I think it was. This
Yeah.
was right after that.
Uh-huh.
And the plant sat right in the middle of Watts, but all of our employees were African Americans. Most of them, some of them were Mexican descent.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie himself was Mexican descent. So we never had any problems there at all. It was good place to work. It was a nasty, dirty business.
Mm-hmm.
The polishing machines created the dust that was probably hazardous to your health, but at that time we didn't know that. But all the wheels that came out of there, we brought them back here to Nixa, Missouri, and by the carload, mind you. And I got on
railroad car.
Well, no, a tractor trailer unit.
Okay.
And I got on the telephone and contacted people all across the central part of the United States to buy Astro wheels from me. And I was, I guess, fortunate enough at it, or good enough at it, that I was able to stay ahead of the production. And that was the base or the backbone of the Keltner business. We really did very well in the chrome wheel business there for a few short years, and it gave us the stake and the money we needed to go ahead and expand our business in the wholesale business.
So you sort of rode the chrome wheel wave.
Right, sure did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too long after that everybody was in that business. It was very, and it's still popular today. Yeah. If you notice all the special wheels that manufacturers put on their cars now. Yeah. And I don't know whether it's as popular as a resale item now as it was then, but then we couldn't get them fast enough. Kids would gobble those wheels up faster than we could get them in.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. We've been speaking with Keith Keltner, one of the Four Pitchikers. Thank you very much.
You're sure welcome. Thank you for being here. And glad to retell my story once more.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So, no, he'll cut it off there.
Okay.
A lot of good stories there.
Yeah, there's so much that I guess that I didn't tell you that popped in my mind after we went by it. I was fortunate enough to have sung in a lot of really famous places, like on top of the Empire State Building and standing out over Niagara Falls, down in the Carlsbad Cavern.
What was it like singing in a cavern? Because there were concerts in fantastic caverns.
Yeah, there's a reverberation in there. Yeah. The sound echoes, re-echoes all the time. The fact of the matter is, speaking of echo, we used to rehearse in the old courthouse building in downtown Springfield at on Boonville and Central Street, right there. Yeah. And because in the dome area there, all the sounds reverberate, and we could sing the softest tones in there, and it would pick it up and reverberate it up. So we used to do a lot of rehearsals in that in the evening. Nobody was there, so we'd go in and break the glasses in there.
Let's bust one.
Let's bust one in there. And I sang in Carnegie Hall. One time, which is a very, very famous place.
You ever sing in the Hollywood Bowl?
No, I have not sung in the Hollywood Bowl.
Trying to think of other major venues.
But
the Civic Opera House in Chicago.
Yep.
That was where the International was.
Yes, it was.
So the International was always at a premier location.
Usually in a premier location somewhere.
That was the big event of.
It was the big event of the year, and it always barbershoppers from all over the world came there. So
I'm ignorant. So there are quartets, and then there are barbershop quartets. Is barbershop quartetting a subset of quartet singing in general, or what constitutes barbershop?
Barbershop is a style of harmony. Quartets can sing, gospel quartets and modern quartet, all types of quartets, girls, boys, everything. And they sing all types of songs, but barbershop quartets sing a particular style of song. It's 4-part harmony, which all 4 parts have a structure in the chord, but the major difference is a seventh chord is prevalent in barbershop singing. So I'll play you a seventh chord just in case you're wondering what a seventh chord is. Now here's a just 4-part harmony. I'm playing it in the key of C.
All right.
That's that. I'm sure you recognize that as being a regular chord. If that was a barbershop arrangement, it would add the seventh, which is this. Hear the difference? You go down from the C to the B flat. So it's a particular style of singing.
Style of singing and style of music.
But the seventh chord highlights it. You can always tell a barbershop quartet when you hear that sound, if you're into music.
Is a barbershop quartet always 4 males?
It doesn't have to be. There's the Sweet Adeline chapter, which is all women, and believe it or not, women can sing 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
It's more difficult for women to sing 4-part harmony because the high note, the tenor note, is extremely high, so they gotta find a soprano that can hit those. But on the other end, the bass note is low enough. Most women don't have a voice that can reach. Hard to find that. But if you find a quartet that has a great bass and tenor, they're really good.
Yeah. Have you followed barbershop quartetting, the years after you got out?
In recent years, I have not.
Okay.
I still like to listen to it, and sometimes I tune it up on my iPad here. I can access barbershop quartets and the latest winners and things like that. And a lot of times I listen to that.
Yeah.
I'm not too impressed with it though. It's changed a lot in the years, as everything does. It's evolved into probably better singers today and better quartets than they were in my day.
Really?
Yeah, I'd say so.
So it's really advanced as
An
art form.
As an art form, yeah. And I think most art forms do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks again very much.